Welcome to another episode of the Back Row Theologians, a podcast where two guys with a particular set of skills talk about theology, or whatever else comes to mind. And now, here are your hosts, Andrew and Ian.
Well, howdy. Welcome to another episode of the Back Row Theologians, a conversation about theology, the church, and the Christian life, with a little nonsense in between. I'm your host, Yates.
And this is Ian.
And we have our very first, I believe, special episode.
That's right. It is the ETS Special. You fanfare.
ETS. Now, that is not a shipping company, Ian. ETS. What is ETS? What does that stand for?
So ETS stands for the Evangelical Theological Society. So it's the academic/professional society for evangelical scholars and pastors. So you might be asking yourself, what do you mean by being an evangelical scholar? I think the idea is to keep it fairly broad. The only thing you have to hold to is the Trinity, which is a good step, and inerrancy, right? Inerrancy is the other one, right?
That's the only two. If you believe that the Bible in its original autographs are infallible and are without error, and if you believe that God is triune, you are welcome. So long as you can, with credentials, speak in with a bow tie, and people won't mock you.
I mean, it's probably even broader than that. If you think it's possible that the Bible is probably mostly correct when it says things most of the time, and you think the Trinity is a thing, you're probably good enough.
Now, I will say, I do feel kind of weird about like exclusive people can't get in kind of clubs as a general rule, but I will say that the place to have really challenging conversations is not around the campfire at summer camp. Like where everyone's got an opinion and you're like, okay, look, if these are all new words for you, we're not going to go very far.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that I have appreciated about this, saying anybody's welcome to come.
Right.
So long as you're generally a Christian. We have a general worldview that's along the same lines. And this isn't brand new to you. So it's not just, oh man, this is what I think. You have actually thought about it for some time.
Sure.
Whatever it is.
Yeah. And you don't have to present a paper or anything to go. You have to have at least be in a master's program. No, you and I went before we even had a master. I think you have to be in a master's program, be sponsored by somebody who has a master's, or it be, professor or such. So it is interesting, a little bit of a insider trading as to how these things work. ETS is always next to or in the same city a few days before a conference called SBL, which is the Society of Biblical Literature. And so the difference is SBL is kind of, 25% of people at SBL think the Bible might be true at times, at best. Most of them are studying the Bible kind of like they would study Homer. You have these two kind of...
Who no one thinks is a god, as a general rule.
As a general rule, not anymore. And so it's kind of an interesting dynamic because the SBL doesn't typically like ETS as much because they think that it's unacademic to come to a book thinking it might be true before you start. So obviously that creates a very different sort of discussion. So most people that are presenting SBL wouldn't step foot in an ETS. Most people that presented ETS, SBL thinks, are too bogus to present. So it's an interesting environment. There's plenty of evangelical scholars out there that don't come because they're at schools where it would be, suicide. It would be academic suicide if you're a professor at Duke, for instance, to come and present that at ETS. Even if you agree with both of those two tenets, you would be looked down on just for coming. So it's a fun environment. The politics even extend to evangelical scholarship. It turns out.
Oh, it's amazing! You're telling me there's politics in a church? Hold up, rewind. How long has that been the case?
I don't think we have any cases in the New Testament of politics or infighting or people not getting along in the church. So it must have been sometime after that.
That's a relief. It's probably the first council. That's when it started. Saint Nick, right? Beating people down? Anyway, come back. Rewind.
We'll preview. We'll talk about Saint Nick at some point.
Too far. So ETS, I think, is really cool because it brings a bunch of people together. There's not like an ETS and then like a competing Christian version of ETS, of like evangelical conference or club or society. I mean, I'm sure it does exist, but it's kind of like you were just telling me about like board games.